Believe it or not, not all of us associated Faker with winning when we started watching League of Legends. This was the first year that I watched Worlds. And while yes, Faker was very much on top of the world still in that tournament, I will never forget the semifinal of him just literally carrying T1 to finals. The opening ceremony and like the analyst desk, like being hyped about them being here, but like the narrative very much being like, yeah, they've kind of been overperforming up to this point. I don't know if they should be in finals. And then it goes to finals and they get smacked heavily. That was my introduction to T1. Not the winning worlds, not the history prior to that, even if I was obviously taught about that as you watch the tournament. That was T1. And that would remain the case for quite some time afterwards as well. I don't think I need to remind T1 fans what 2018 and 2019 were like. I'm sure European fans are already biting at the chance to be able to make sure that they can remind you exactly how bad it was for T1 that you couldn't take a single best of 5 off of G2 that year. But for those of us that started watching League of Legends during that period, it was like, okay, we had heard about these like dynasty rosters that would just smash League of Legends and would just be proverbial favorites each and every year. As long as they made it to Worlds, they were fine. We never really got that. Like, from you got to look back at the Worlds results from 2018 to 2022. There was no consistency to it. Sure, Europe made finals twice, the LPL was crushing, but it's not like it was consistent teams either. The closest thing that we had to that was whenever Damwon Kia came in, smashes 2020, and then has the potential to go back to back in 2021, but fail. And it's like, okay, well, the first chance that somebody got to try and do the thing that T1 was doing for such a long period of time, they failed. So unfortunately, they weren't the ones. But 2022 was an interesting experience for those of us that weren't around for like the OG days and have never seen T1 win a title. When they got back to the finals, especially against DRX, it was like everybody was picking T1 to probably win this thing. You had this new roster for T1, including Zeus, Owner, Faker, Gumayusi, and Keria, that it was like, okay, this is the next generation of T1. This is going to be the roster that brings back that feeling of the old days. And those of us that were watching from the outside looking in were like, okay, we don't quite fully know what you mean by that. Like, we don't know the emotion behind it, but sure, why not? Let's give it a chance. And they lost spectacularly at the final moment there. I was at Worlds Finals 2022. I heard the roars whenever Gumayusi stole Baron, whenever he stole Dragon, and it looked like T1 was going to win it, only for it to be taken away from them at the very last minute. That series was hype. Everything about it was amazing, but it was clear that like people were still happy for Deft winning it. The whole Last Dance narrative was like this thing that kind of went alongside of it that allowed this extra like opposite polar end of it that you definitely would not see in the 2 years afterwards. But it really wasn't until 2023 whenever you kind of came to this realization that, wait a minute, these guys might be the real deal. 2023 Worlds, once T1 got past JDG, was just a formality at that point. Like, once they made it to finals, it was like, okay, T1's got this in the bag. We're finally going to be able to see T1 win their title. There's really not much to say on that, like, other than, hey, we finally got to watch T1 win a title. We got to see Faker get his redemption arc, which by all means was great because that's where many of us started back in 2017. To be able to have that moment, which they had in the trailers of him crying to then come back up, was amazing. But it wasn't just Faker, it was also the players around him, because very much last year, Zeus, don't forget, was carrying the ever-living shit out of T1 in that finals, in that tournament for the most part. Faker had a down year and wasn't playing his absolute best, but it was the 4 other players around him that very much lifted the entire team up, and Faker obviously caught up as well then. But right then and there, it was like, oh, this is a different T1. And there were rumors of Zeus possibly leaving at the end of last year, but he stayed around for another year. And it was like, okay, now we can get used to these names and like really kind of lock in with them. And by all means, they had their struggles throughout the entire year this year, but whenever it came to Worlds again, there was this underlying swelling of, hey, the old T1 like motto of like they're at Worlds, it doesn't matter, is back. And even I didn't believe it. Because again, I'd never seen it. You want to buy into it. You want to believe that they'll go to finals, but like, it's not just a foregone conclusion that because T1's in the tournament, they're going to win it, right? Wrong. After Worlds this year, I can confidently say this is the first time for many of us that we understand the T1 magic. We get why it's so appealing, especially watching Faker pop off in the way that he did, but everybody else on the team playing well. The ZOFGK roster was just, it's something special. Like even back in the old days of T1, I mean, they'd still cycle through players every now and then. This is the longest standing roster of all time in League of Legends. And it really did a good job of helping us bond with individual players. Even if you weren't a fan of the region or even a fan of T1, you knew this roster, you knew the players, you knew their stories. They were around together for such a long period of time that it's like, this is awesome. And I'll be honest with you, I did not think that it would come to an end. I really didn't. With the news that Zeus is going to Hanwha Life and is out of T1, I know there's rumors swirling about how this happened, the agents, etc. I'm not listening to any of that noise at the moment. When the truth comes out, it comes out. But at the end of the day, he's not going to be on T1. And it definitely feels like the family breaking up and your parents going through divorce a little bit. I didn't think there was going to be a world where T1 didn't stay together for this, because there's so many people pointing out, oh, well, he wanted to prove himself without Faker. Bro, it's not like Zeus is 32 years old and playing in the league. He's still young. He has every chance in the world after Faker retires or after they try and go for the three-peat to go out and prove yourself on your own with a different roster. All you had to do was sign a one-year deal with T1, and I'm sorry, but the history of becoming the first ever team to three-peat, to me, and I'm not in his shoes, so I'm not going to try and act like I would understand, but like if you tell me that I get a chance at history, that's something that no player has ever done, not even Faker himself independently with past teams has ever accomplished, yeah, I'm gonna try for that goal with all costs. If you fail, you fail. But for the life of me, I'm shocked. I cannot believe that Zeus did not re-sign with T1, that they did not go for the three-peat and for the history. This truly does feel like an abrupt, unprompted end of an era. At least with G2, back whenever they broke up. We had the 2019 Miracle run. 2020, they kind of fell off a little bit more, but it was like, okay. And you already knew there were issues because certain players had role swapped with perks and caps, and they were swapping back and forth. Like you could tell the problems were arising and eventually something would happen. But with this, it was like, what, money? That's it? Money's the thing that drove everybody apart? I get in traditional sports, it is next to impossible, I don't think anybody in the NFL has ever done it, of three-peating titles. It was already a miracle that Brady was able to do it back-to-back, and now the Chiefs have done it back-to-back. But doing that third time, that third time is not easy at all. It's an unprecedented feat. And by all means, the introduction of the salary cap definitely has impacts on this, because as players continue to win, the potential for them to get more money and go elsewhere increases tenfold. Zeus's value has just been increasing year over year over year. And it's one of those where when you look back at like Bjergsen and TSM, he could have taken the bag and gone elsewhere, but he took certain pay cuts to try and get to Worlds, etc. And like for this roster, now that they have all players that could realistically sign multi-million-dollar deals with other organizations, yes, some of them are going to have to take pay cuts in order to keep this roster together. The question is that passion enough for everybody to just overlook it and say, hey, you know what? Who gives a fuck about the money for 1 year? 1 year, ignore the money. We're going to go for this three-peat, and it is what it is. To have it ripped away from us, honestly, like it's shocking. I'm still processing it, obviously, because I'm personally not ready to say goodbye to this era. That was, it felt like we didn't get the ending that we like. This Worlds by all means was great, it was awesome, but like this felt like the climax. Like Worlds 2023 was like the liftoff point. This is the climax, and now you want to know whether they can like push the next envelope and even like make it even higher. Like we're talking like Avengers Endgame level of peak, or do you fall off beforehand? Like that's part of the journey, but like for the book to close before we even get to that point, just it feels like your heart's ripped out from underneath you. And to be clear, I don't blame Zeus in the same way that I wouldn't blame NFL players for getting the bag and going somewhere else when your star value is at its highest. All of this, everything in life is fleeting, and these moments ultimately are meaningless if you don't have the money to be able to, I mean, they have enough money as is, but if you don't, you're not going to get the chance to sign that big of a contract, likely again due to the salary cap and revenues being what they are in leagues. I don't blame them at all. But as fans now, like you can tell by the reaction on social media, we're just left here with this hole, wondering, wow, what could have been? And now going into the LCK next year, it's already the most interesting league in the world, but it just became even more so. I personally have not ever really followed the LCK barring the big matches and playoffs. Like, I know the storylines as they're talked about on Hotline League and others, and I know some of the big names, but like, I've never actually followed it. I never really had a reason to. But this offseason, the combination of the salary cap, the T1 drama, and everything else, I'm going to start watching the LCK. 100%. I don't know how that's going to impact this channel. This channel is going to be almost all North America still, but I might weave in some international stuff every now and then. It won't be on the pit, obviously. Won't be on the rendezvous, but it's not like I can't do these one-off commentary videos I do all the time and just do an occasional like weekly maybe check-in or like every other week check-in with the LCK and just talk about it. I mean, I'll talk about it daily on TikTok because there I do like consistent updates, but I'm not sure what it means for YouTube. But either way, Zeus, T1, Berserker going over to the LCK, it's all captured my attention. And while I'm sad to see the end of an era for T1, it really feels like we're at the launching point for something truly unique and special for the LCK upcoming. Now, I just need to find a team to support because I'm a team guy over players every single time. So maybe that's a video I need to do on its own. Really diving into the 10 teams of the LCK, what makes them up. They're players somewhat, sure, but then upper management as well. And I'll pick one and follow it for the entire year because as always, when one door closes, another one opens.